Hey everyone, really great to be back. Today we're going to talk about spiral dynamics stage blue. We're just going to set out this stage of spiral dynamics. This is the fourth stage in the spiral dynamics model, and it's really crucial to understanding yourself, society, and the issues that human beings are facing right now and have been facing for most of human history. A lot of them come down to this blue stage. And I don't say that to condemn it, but just as a matter of fact explanation as to why human society works the way it does is a lot of it is because of this stage. And so it's really crucial that we understand it so that we can more fully understand the world and ourselves and other people. This is a Deep Psychology podcast. I'm your host, Ross Edwards, writer, meditation teacher, founder of deep-psychology.com, and avid lover of all things psychological. In listening to this podcast, you're part of the worldwide deep psychology community of tens of thousands of people undertaking profound personal transformation. You can join us on any of the major podcasting platforms and make sure to visit the site deep-psychology.com for lots of high quality resources. Let's get started. I've been recently integrating things like spiral dynamics and worldviews and psychology into my meditation classes, and now really what I'm doing is psycho-spirituality. I'm not just teaching meditation to people and trying to help them develop their spiritual life. I really want to help them understand psychology very deeply, and the two come together beautifully, psychology and spirituality. So if you're interested in that, please head to deep-psychology.com and check out what we're doing with the classes and coaching at the moment. I'd be really glad to see you there. I just want to remind you before we talk about blue that what a stage is, right? I'm repeating this because I see a lot of people talking about spiral dynamics, and I even see it in sort of the official kind of books on the subject, that people tend to kind of oversimplify the model, oversimplify the idea of a stage, and what they end up with is a kind of caricature. It's like when you simplify a model too much, it presents a caricature of the world, and it doesn't actually represent the world accurately. And people do this all the time with spiral dynamics, and they sort of misjudge and misinterpret what a stage really is, right? So I want to lay out what my thoughts on this are. So you can think of a stage, first of all, as a system that dominates for a certain chronological period of time in your personal life. So if you look back, let's take the example of stage blue. If you look back in your life, there'll be a time where stage blue came online for you, and that pretty much formed most of your identity. Again, I mean, even that is an oversimplification, right? For many reasons, but let's use it as a nice, back pocket rule of thumb. It dominates for a certain chronological period of time in your life, right? So that's really crucial. And we often talk about stages in this way. I went through blue, and then I went through orange, and I went through green, and all, right? So that's where that comes from. A stage, in terms of its content, is a new set of worldviews, values, skills, and motivations that remain active once you pass through the dominant phase. So this is really crucial to understand, that while it's true that there are things we leave behind, in a certain way we actually pass through a stage, which implies that we leave it behind. In other very, very important ways that you probably don't even realize, because once you've passed through a stage, once you've passed through stage blue as a dominant phase, you're sort of used to it, and it's like riding a bike. You just do it without really thinking. You understand blue without really realizing that that's what you're doing. However, if you understand what blue is, then you look at your own psychology, you'll realize that I've actually still got those worldviews, values, skills, and motivations, right, from blue. And that's really crucial to know. A stage is both individual and collective. So we don't want to artificially separate the two because they really aren't very separate at all. It's not that they're not separate at all. They have different manifestations, but they're really both two sides of the same coin. However, we also don't want to confuse collective and individual manifestations of blue. It's quite different to look at blue in a modern individual that grows up in like a modern first world country to blue as it appeared historically in the great empires, and blue as it appears in the Middle East now, or blue as it appears in a political group. They mirror one another. Absolutely, they mirror one another, and they inform one another. Of course, they do. If you know about how blue operates in individuals, it's not so difficult to extrapolate that. However, I just want to be clear, because people just mix up the two, and to me it's confusing. It's not, they sort of mix them up and blend them, and I don't think it's from a place of integrating or being holistic. I think it's just not quite understanding the theory and really what spiral dynamics is trying to say, right? So we're gonna look at examples of blue, and we're gonna sort of tease apart individual and collective so that you understand that. A stage is all around us and likely in you. So what I mean by this is that if you look around in society and other people, blue is all around you. Obviously, it depends on where you are, the country you're in, the city you're in. That of course has a big impact, but you will see blue around you. Like that is pretty much guaranteed. And you'll see it in you. And this is where we need to be very honest with ourselves and not just want to say, oh, well, I'm yellow or I'm turquoise. I mean, there's many problems with saying that, but one of them is that you're not recognizing that, okay, maybe you really do identify with yellow a lot, right? For example. But these stages do not disappear. They just get recontextualized and sort of reintegrated and remetabolized. If you really want to understand this theory, if you really want to have it to have a transformative impact on you, you've got to see all the stages as potentially active, and as especially the lower ones as probably active in you, right? So look for blue in yourself. So a stage in spiral dynamics is also a set of worldview, psychology, and values. And I say this because people often just say, well, it's just values. Spiral dynamics is just talking about values. I don't agree with that at all. If you read the spiral dynamics theory, it's talking about way more than values. I mean, you could debate which one is primary. Is it our worldview? Is it our psychology? Is it our values? Is there one that causes the others? I don't have the answer to that question, by the way. But I'm not convinced that it all comes just from values, because you could just say, well, where do our values come from? Where does that come from? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Worldview, psychology, and values. That's how I always teach spiral dynamics, because that's what I think it covers, right? It doesn't cover all development. That's the other point I want to make. You cannot just reduce all developmental psychology to spiral dynamics. That is also a mistake. It's quite a long topic, but that is a mistake. It covers worldview, psychology, and values. Blue is a very well established phase. So not so long ago, I did an episode on spiral dynamics stage turquoise, and I spent about 15 minutes at the start of the episode explaining why you cannot take my descriptions too seriously with spiral dynamics stage turquoise. And listen, I'm not saying that you need to listen to everything I say and agree with me. That I'm not really interested in that. But what I can say is that when there are theories about stages like stage blue, you can be pretty sure that they're grounded on real world data and conclusions drawn from that, which is a good thing to know. So we're not just making it up. This is actually studied and understood. Stage blue, or its analog, appears in countless developmental models. I don't know how many it would be, like over 30, definitely sort of over 30, but pretty much all developmental models have a blue analog, right? In other words, they have a stage of development that corresponds to blue. So we understand that this is a well-established phase of child development, of societal development. It's, we can pretty much say this is a psychological system. We are sure that it exists, right? So let's now talk about just a bit of an introduction to spiral dynamic stage blue before we get into like real nitty gritty. And I want to say that we often describe blue very negatively. One of the things I hate about spiral dynamics is that people just idealize the higher stages. And I understand that. I really do understand why. But the problem is that the higher stages, well, there's so many problems with doing that I can't even get into it now. But it's an error to idealize the higher stages and think that they are, in all cases and for everyone, they are the best. That's what we need to try and do. We need to get everyone to yellow. That's a mistake. And because of this, we sort of, and blue is a good example of this because it's one of the earlier stages, and it's in its negative form to our modern and postmodern mind, it can be quite repulsive, to be honest. So we often describe blue with negative, really really the worst examples of blue, like Nazi ideology, which is, it's a blue ideological system. But to just say, oh, well, blue ideology is like Nazi ideology, that's doing a very big disservice to this stage of development. Like it's a very gross example. I want you to understand that, and this is one mistake, again, I don't want to sound like I'm just moaning about other people that talk about spiral dynamics, but I see it, I really do, and it bothers me. I want you to understand that blue did not exist in your psychology at one point. Blue did not exist for you. It didn't exist for me. It didn't exist in human society whatsoever. And that it has specific contributions that it makes. And quite honestly, it wouldn't exist if it didn't contribute something. This is not a mistake, right? So I'm saying this because people often frivolize it and they sort of look down on it and say, oh, well, that's stage blue, blah, blah, blah. That was like medieval. And no, without blue, we cannot move forward. And blue dominated human history for about 2,000 years at least, and it's still dominating. It's still, in many parts of the world, quite a sizable percentage of the population, some say even up to 70%, are essentially blue, right? So we really need to understand this stage as it is, right? So, okay, let's now just do a sort of overview of blue. So it's one of the major systems that are online at the moment. Beige, purple, red, not so much. Of course, we all go through these stages, but in terms of society, in terms of human collectives, beige, purple, and red are not really that active. Blue, orange, and green are the active ones, especially in the US, where they are really like in your face. Blue, orange, and green are really in your face. And so knowing this just helps orient you. So you can see, well, okay, I'm seeing this thing happening. I'm seeing this other thing happening. I'm seeing this conflict. I'm seeing that war. I'm seeing this and that. Watch out for blue. Watch out for the blue mind, the blue worldview, blue psychology, blue values, right? And it's actually one of the dominant stages active in the culture wars. So in the culture wars, which are particularly active in the US, you've got blue, orange, and green fighting with each other. That is the culture wars. We don't want to frivolize it and oversimplify it, but that is one way we can look at it and we say, well, it's blue, orange, and green fighting. You can think of blue as like the backbone of society, like the traditional structures of society. These are blue sort of based organizations, right? Both the people in them are often sort of blue orientated, and the actual just sort of the way that these systems have been created and when they were created were in traditional societies, right? So things like the family institution, this idea of monogamy and having children with one person, that is a blue structure. I mean, I can't say how it was 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, but that structure is very blue. It's like sacrificing to the family, to other people, and there was all kinds of laws around it. There still are, of course, but particularly in traditional societies, you can see that family. There are a lot of laws around family. There's a lot of stuff you can and cannot do. The church is I'm talking about the entire like Catholic Church is a very blue institution, for better and for worse. These, as I said, these things have positive and negative and manifestations, but the Catholic Church is essentially blue, right? It was formed, it was formed, and when human society was becoming very blue. When blue was appearing for the first time in human society to a large degree. And this is one of the problems with the church, is that, just to give a very simple explanation, that the church is a blue institution that is trying to work in an orange-green, in like modern countries, like in the West and in English-speaking developed countries. The church is dying among large segments of the population because people just do not resonate with blue anymore. They're orange or green, and we've got scientific knowledge and so on that comes in and basically just destroys the Bible. So yeah, welcome to human affairs and human society. But even things like the government governments are blue institutions in the sense that they govern a country. That we take that for granted. We take for granted that governments govern an entire country, but you have to realize that is a blue structure. Such big structures did not exist in human history. There was no such thing as countries at some point. There was no such thing as, paying taxes to a government. There was no such thing as a national flag. There was no such thing as, goodness me, all the governance, all the legal, all the organizations involved. There was none of that, right? It's a blue phenomenon. And it's also blue in the sense that it's quite bureaucratic and it's quite kind of rigid, and it's sort of got this national undertone. Governments tend to kind of conflict with one another in this kind of ethnocentric way. And for better or for worse, we can see blue in a lot of these institutions like family, church, government. It comes online for us. I'm talking, when I say us, I'm just kind of assuming that most people live in a modern country here, with modern technology, modern education, and sort of a sensitivity for human rights, and even pushing into sort of more green concerns, with concerns for sort of egalitarianism and equality and so on. For people in those countries, it comes on in early childhood. And really, I think it comes online in school, probably primary school, the first few years. And it's really when you start to realize that you need to play by the rules. You actually want to follow the rules. And it's not it's not just that you follow the rules as a conscious thing. It's more like they actually sort of define your identity. So obviously late in your development, once you move beyond blue dominance, you continue to follow the rules. Of course you do, because you realize that they actually exist for a reason, and that if you don't, you're going to get punished, right? But at blue, the rules are actually like an identity defining thing. It's like I feel this sense of joy from following the rules. I feel like a sense of duty and obligation. I feel guilty when I don't do it, and I feel like I should be punished, right? I remember in school, this was how I used to feel. We'll return to this in a minute. Blue is more of a communal stage. It's not communal in the sense of like green, communal, like getting together and in circles and whatever. It's communal in the sense that it's not got so much. Its identity is really defined by the collective that it identifies with, really, rather than standing out as an individual, right? And we see this in the spiral dynamic stages. They go individual, which is like beige, red, orange, yellow, and they swing to collective, purple, blue, green, turquoise. Each stage is it switches. So if you go beige to purple, you become collective. Purple to red, you become individual, and back and forth that way. So this is one of the communal ones. Blue in general, and I mean in society and in individuals, it civilizes like the violent red impulses. So for example, if you look at the Ten Commandments, right, and you look at them in a literal sense, which at one point that was like the literal laws, that was what you had to follow as a citizen, right? I mean, to some degree it is still that way, but the laws are no longer the Ten Commandments. They are more sort of legal and bureaucratic than that. But listen, look at the Ten Commandments. What are they? They are civilizing our impulses to kill, to be adulterous, to pursue sex, to steal, and all the rest of it. It's basically civilizing us. And what I want you to realize is that at some point in your development, you do not have the psychological or neurological apparatus to understand that you need to play by the rules. This life thing isn't just about doing whatever the hell you want without caring about the consequences. You hurt people's feelings, you cause chaos, and you just cannot live life like that, right? This is what blue is about. And this is what blue did historically when, I'm not saying that blue societies aren't chaotic. Blue societies, by our modern standards, it's chaos, right? But what it's trying to do, it's trying to really rein in these impulses, right? And it does this through very brute punishment. If you look at how societies in the past used to punish people, we'll talk about this more again later on, but the torture wasn't out of, that was normal. Public executions, chopping people's hands off for robbing, for example. The electric chair, that's still around in some states in America. These very brutal punishments, because that's how the blue mind operates. It operates in terms of rules and punishments for not following the rules, right? That's just how it works. So we go from the chaos of red to the order of blue. So it's essentially the polar opposite. And again, I'm not saying this works perfectly. I'm not saying everyone suddenly moves to blue in a society. What I'm saying is that these blue structures come in there and they try and civilize everyone. It's a world of morality. It's a world of rules, of discipline, of being faithful to something bigger than ourselves that tells us how to live our life, rather than just us and our raw impulses. Often here you'll find fundamentalists and very strong sort of religious believers. There's morality that comes from following rules and directives handed down from other people, and a sense of guilt for not adhering to that. It's around 5,000 years old as a structure, as like a well established structure that is, you can point to it and you can say, well, this, the appearance of empires is a very blue thing. The appearance of big city states is a blue thing. The appearance of rulers that have divine authority and so on. These are sort of the blue manifestations, and they started coming on. Sometimes I say 2,000 or 3,000 years, and I don't really know why, but we're in the ballpark of less than 10,000, certainly within the last 5,000 years, right? So we've done a bit of an overview, and that sets it up nicely into going a bit more fine-grained into what blue really is, right? So let's look at the individual manifestations of it. What's it like to hold this worldview as a person? What's it like to have blue values? What's it like to have a blue psychology as a person? Rather than looking at the collective. We're going to look at that soon. Well, basically, blue comes online when we kind of get fed up of our impulses, of just fully expressing our impulses with no guidelines, really. I mean, when you're a child, as I said, you do not have the capacity to understand rules. You don't understand these general abstract things that apply to all behavior at all times, right? You just do not have if you've been a parent, you know this. I haven't, but I've observed it in children, and I know it in myself. I mean, listen, it might not be that you consciously tell yourself, I'm tired of this, I want some rules, and I want some focus, and I want some direction. It's more just that often what will happen is you end up in a blue structure. You end up in a religious community, or you end up in a school, which we all do, or you end up I don't know, these stages of development, they come online of their own accord a lot of the time. Sometimes you just need the right conditions for several stages to appear, and they naturally just develop over time. We learn discipline for the first time. This is a remarkable achievement of blue. It's like we actually learn that our immediate impulses, we can delay them, and we can delay them according to a set of directives or rules that tell us how we should live, and what are good what are sociable impulses and what are not, what is going to hurt other people and what isn't, what does it mean to be a citizen, what does it mean to be a good child, what does it mean to be a good student. We learn all of this. We start to learn self-evaluation, so we're able to look at our behavior, and we're able to say, well, okay, I did that, and that doesn't follow the rules, and that didn't follow what my teacher says, or my parent, or the law, or my religious leader, and we feel guilty. One of the dominant emotions at blue is guilt, and I remember when I was at school, well, not throughout school, I think later in my years I developed more into orange, but, especially sort of in primary school, I remember being terrified of being sent to the head teacher for doing something wrong. And I say something wrong in quotation marks, because these things are kind of arbitrary. Like, when I actually think about the behavior what I'd done, I hadn't really done anything. But that's the thing, that that when you're a child, you don't understand that rules are kind of arbitrary, and that the teachers that are in charge are kind of arbitrary as well. Because your mind is you're going through this phase of internalizing the rules and learning how to behave and be disciplined and be part of a bigger structure. You feel guilt, because you feel guilty for not following the rules. It's as simple as that. It's a very concrete, it's very black and white, right? And I remember at school, as I said, I felt petrified of breaking the rules, and I felt petrified of the head teacher, just this 56-year-old man that would shout at me, and I was 8 or 9, and it's terrifying, right? But when I look back, I'm like, why did I care? But you have to understand that is just the blue mind, okay? There's self-sacrifice here. So this is when we start to get a bigger identity than just ourselves. I remember, at a certain point, I realized, okay, I'm actually part of, I'm part of the area I grew up in. I'm part of my city. I'm part of my country. I'm part of my football team. The football team that I support. I'm part of that group. I'm part of that tribe that follows the football team, right? So your identity expands here. And what you'll notice in blue people and in the blue dominant blue phase of your life is that your identity is very much smudged with your group identity. And you sort of adopt all the customs and beliefs and ideas and values and so on of the group that you are sacrificing to. And you tend to believe that that's like the only way, right? And you can't sort of see beyond that. But it's a good, healthy and necessary development, because it allows us to be part of something bigger than ourselves for really the first time. I mean, you could argue at purple, but at purple we don't have a full developed sense of identity yet. At blue we have quite a strong sense of identity in terms of just like our psychological self, and we are learning that we can have that and we can be part of something else, right? And you have to realize this is not this does not exist before, right? At blue we to sort of caricature it, this is where we start wearing our uniform, we start obeying the teacher, we start following the rules unquestionably, and we face punishment if we don't. And you can apply this across any sphere. You could apply this to someone who takes great pride in wearing their work clothes and obeying the boss and following the rules of the workplace. And listen, we all need to do that to some extent. Or it could be someone who, wears their religious uniform and follows the religious leader unquestionably, and they follow the rules and the commandments and all the rest of it. Interestingly enough, what I've realized in studying blue over the years is that the bad kids at my school did not have blue, right? They could not follow the rules, and they loved rebelling. They loved sticking it to the teacher. That is red. It's pure impulse expression they just do not give a shit. And I remember some of the things that the bad kids used to do. And listen, I was a bad kid for a bit as well, so I know some of the things they used to do were really horrible. And I realize now that they were red. They just did not care. They were egocentric, impulsive, and they just loved sticking up other people, right? And so that is a kind of nice back pocket way of realizing when blue comes online for you in a modern context is probably in school. And you look at the bad kids and you're like, well, why are they so undisciplined? Why can't they follow the rules? Why can't they just sit there? Because they've not got the psychological system online yet. In terms of a religious context, blue, and I'm saying this out of study, not out of personal experience, because I was not brought up in a religious context, but blue comes online in a religious upbringing context when we realize that, oh my goodness me, there is something transcendent, there is something bigger than me that has a divine nature, that has like a spiritual nature, and that it looks after me, it cares for me. And all I need to do to care for it, to love it, to receive its love in return, to guarantee that I am looked after by it, is to follow the rules, to worship, to go to church, to do this and that. This is when we awaken our religious life. And it's like when we become, a good Christian, a Christian that follows the rules and does, they don't want to go to hell, they want to go to heaven, they want to live in paradise, right? So they follow the rules, and they think that that's going to lead to reward. And I don't mean that to demean it, because in many ways it does lead to reward. It leads to like a strong religious affiliation. It leads to a connection with God, to Jesus, to order, to a holy life, to like a divine life, rather than just like chaos or hedonism. As I said, I did not live like this because before I was sort of green, I'd never had a spiritual life, in terms of believing that or knowing that there is a God, but I have seen it. And so look for that in yourself. If you had a religious upbringing, you might realize that blue is when you realize that you actually had a personal conscious connection to God or to Jesus or to whoever, whatever your religion is. You can swap out those terms. All right, so because this is a long topic, quite a complicated topic, I'm going to stop there for today. This is the end of part 1 of Spiral Dynamics Stage Blue. I'm going to have a repost episode on Monday, and I'm going to have the next installment of the Spiral Dynamics Stage Blue episode for you next Thursday. So thanks a lot for tuning in, and I will see you soon for the next installment. Take care. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email me at ross@deep-psychology.com. If you'd like to go deeper, head to deep-psychology.com for articles, courses, ebooks, and one-to-one coaching. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.